Every single hero's journey you've ever heard, from the stories that shaped your childhood to the myths that still stir something deep in your chest, begins with the same encounter. It is not with a wise mentor, it is not with a magical sword, it is with a serpent. Think about it with me for a moment. Perseus faces Medusa, whose serpentine hair turns men to stone with a single gaze. Heracles fights the Hydra, whose heads multiply with each strike of his blade. Apollo descends to the earth to slay Python and claim the oracle at Delphi. In the frozen realms of Norse mythology, Thor battles Jörmungandr, the world serpent, whose massive coils encircle all of Midgard. St. George drives his lance through the heart of the dragon. Michael the Archangel conquers Satan himself in his serpentine form. And in the oldest stories of all, Marduk dismembers Tiamat, the primordial chaos dragon from whose body the world itself is formed. But this pattern reaches far beyond Western stories as it travels to India, where you'll find Vishnu resting eternally on the cosmic serpent Shesha, while Krishna dances fearlessly on the many heads of the serpent king Kaliya. The Buddha himself sits in perfect meditation beneath the protective hood of the great serpent Mukhalinda. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs wore the urea serpent as a crown, the symbol of divine power coiling around their brow. The Aztecs worshipped Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent that bridges earth and sky, matter and spirit. Even the Aboriginal peoples of Australia speak of the rainbow serpent that carved the landscape with its massive movements and brought the life-giving rains. This pattern, ever present in our oldest stories, is precisely why this channel exists. Welcome to Irevelato. My mission here is to pull back the veil on the hidden patterns that shape our lives, to reveal the timeless psychological truths operating just beneath the surface of our modern world. And today we talk about heroes and serpents. Carl Jung, that titan of the human psyche, recognized this pattern with piercing clarity. In his memoir, he observed something that should jolt us all awake. He wrote, "In myth, the snake is a frequent counterpart of the hero. There are numerous accounts of their affinity. Therefore, the presence of the snake was an indication of a hero myth." Do you hear what he's revealing? The serpent doesn't blunder accidentally into the hero's path, as if to say, "Oh, I'm just passing through, don't mind me." No, the serpent belongs there. It's anticipated, it's ordained. Often it was there before the hero, coiled in ambush, as if heroism demands its presence. But why? What is it about our imagination that returns obsessively and compulsively to this singular confrontation between hero and serpent? Jung gives us the surface answer in his work on symbolic life. He tells us that the universal hero myth shows us the picture of a powerful man or god-man who vanquishes evil in the form of dragons, serpents, monsters, demons, and enemies of all kinds, and who liberates his people from destruction and death. But this explanation barely scratches the surface. It's almost painfully inadequate when you consider the sheer magnetic pull this archetype exerts across millennia. Why this specific image? Why not the hero versus the storm, or the hero versus the mountain, or the hero versus the void? Why does our collective unconscious fixate so relentlessly on this particular dance of opposition? The answer lies deeper than Jung's surface reading suggests. The serpent is the primordial embodiment of everything that came before consciousness, before order, before even the heroic principle in itself. It is the ancient brain, the reptilian foundation upon which all higher thought is built. When the hero faces the serpent, they're confronting the evolutionary substrate of their own being. The serpent is time itself made manifest. It's the endless cycle, the Ouroboros, the eternal return that consciousness must transcend to become truly conscious. The hero's victory is not over something foreign. It is the triumph of the mind over its own foundational programming. The moment when awareness breaks free from the hypnotic coils of pure instinct. However, Jung understood that the hero doesn't simply destroy evil. Something far more profound and more shattering occurs in this encounter. In his 1925 seminar, he revealed a truth that changes everything. He said, "The serpent leads the psychological movement apparently astray into the kingdom of shadows, dead and wrong images, but also into earth, into concretization. Inasmuch as the serpent leads into the shadows, it has the function of the anima. It leads you into the depths. It connects the above and below. The serpent is also the symbol of wisdom. Can you feel the earth shifting beneath your feet? If this kind of wisdom feels urgently relevant to your life, consider supporting its spread. If these ideas deserve a wider audience, help me reach them. If this work matters to you, your support would mean everything. A subscription, a like, or a thoughtful comment is a signal to the algorithm that deep dives like this are valuable and should be shared. But it's also something more personal. It tells me these ideas are landing with people who recognize their own serpents in these ancient patterns. Your engagement helps this work find others who are ready to stop running from their dragons and start integrating them. Watching until the end ensures that the signal is heard loud and clear. But more importantly, it means you're willing to sit with difficult truths rather than clicking away when things get uncomfortable. That willingness to stay present with challenging ideas is exactly the kind of courage this transformation requires. It makes a great difference to the work's reach and to my understanding of what is on the minds of fellow travelers on this path. I appreciate you for both. That discomfort you feel when these ideas challenge everything you thought you knew, that's your own serpent stirring. The serpent becomes an obstacle and a guide, an enemy that teaches, something that destroys while revealing the deepest truths. As contradictory as it sounds, this is how transformation actually works. Think about every moment in your life when you've grown, really grown. Not when someone praised you or handed you something easy, but when you were forced to confront what you didn't want to see about yourself, about reality, about the way things actually work. The serpent in your story wasn't there to ruin you. It was your initiation. It dragged you, kicking and screaming, into territories of yourself you never knew existed. The hero's journey, at its most visceral level, becomes an encounter with internal depths that our sanitized, surface-level consciousness fears to explore. We spend our lives building walls against our own darkness, our own capacity for failure, and our own shadow. But the serpent doesn't respect those walls. It coils around them, crushes them, forces us into the basement of our own being, where all the real treasure is buried. And here's what will break your mind. The only way up is going down. Always. The same way Jesus descended to hell before his resurrection. The same way every addict hits rock bottom before recovery. The same way every authentic breakthrough requires you to first break apart. The serpent is not trying to destroy the hero. The serpent is trying to complete them. Jung's description of the solar hero myth reveals this pattern with breathtaking clarity and consistency. In the structure and dynamics of the psyche, he describes the archetypal journey that plays out in the depths of every psyche. Every morning a divine hero is born from the sea and mounts the chariot of the sun. In the west, a great mother awaits him, and he is devoured by her in the evening. In the belly of a dragon he traverses the depths of the midnight sea. After a frightful combat, notice the sequence that Jung reveals here. The hero's apparent death, his being swallowed by the dragon, becomes a precondition for his deepest journey. Inside the dragon's belly, traversing the midnight sea, the hero encounters forces that his daylight consciousness simply cannot face. Thus, the serpent swallows the hero to initiate him into mysteries that can only be learned in darkness. The belly of the dragon becomes the womb of rebirth, and from this rebirth you learn to become a phoenix. This is why, in every story worth telling, the serpent guards the treasure. Jung explains this again with devastating precision. In the depths, as a rule, is a treasure guarded by a serpent or a dragon. In order to recover the treasure, the dragon has to be overcome. The treasure is of a very mysterious nature. It is connected with the serpent in a strange way. The peculiar nature of the serpent denotes the character of the treasure, as though the two things were one. Stop and let that sink in. The serpent and the treasure exist in mysterious unity. They are aspects of the same fundamental reality. Jung goes even deeper when he observes that often there is a golden snake with the treasure. Gold is something that everyone is seeking, so we could say that it looks as if the serpent himself were the great treasure, the source of immense power. The guardian becomes the gift. The enemy reveals itself as the ally, wearing the perfect disguise. Everything you thought you needed to defeat turns out to be everything you actually needed to embrace. In alchemical terms, this ultimate treasure, the Philosopher's Stone, is the subject of one of my most important videos. Christ is the Philosopher's Stone, Carl Jung on psychology and alchemy. Accessing this treasure requires a radically different approach than we've been taught. Jung discovered this in his own harrowing psychological journey through what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. The approach becomes integration rather than conquest. In his Red Book, his legendary record of his descent into the depths of his own psyche, he confesses something that changes everything. That which is lacking in the pure principle appears as the serpent. The hero strives after the utmost in the pure principle, and therefore he finally falls for the serpent. If you go to thinking, take your heart with you. If you go to love, take your head with you. Love is empty without thinking, thinking hollow without love. Here, Jung reveals the serpent's deepest function as a compensatory force in the psyche. When consciousness becomes dangerously one-sided, pursuing what he calls the pure principle, without balance, the serpent appears to restore equilibrium. The serpent completes the hero's quest by embodying whatever aspect of wholeness the hero has neglected, denied, or tried to transcend. This is why Jung warns us with such urgency that the serpent lurks behind the pure principle. Any attempt to achieve perfection through exclusion, any effort to become purely one thing while rejecting its opposite, inevitably summons the intervention of the serpent. It's a cosmic law as reliable as gravity. The hero who pursues only light will meet the dragon of darkness. The hero who seeks only spirit will encounter the serpent of matter. The hero who claims only consciousness will be confronted by the serpent of the unconscious. This law operates without exception. Jung's own personal encounter with his inner serpent in the Red Book illuminates this process with a touch of intimacy. He writes, "Therefore I lost courage, until I found the serpent that at once led me across to the other principle. In climbing down, I become smaller." Jung lost courage. Think about that. This towering intellect, this man who would become a central figure of psychology, admits he lost his nerve. And what saved him? The serpent. The thing he was probably terrified to face became the bridge to everything he needed to discover about himself. But look at what happens when he follows the serpent's lead. He becomes smaller. There's something almost childlike in that admission. The serpent teaches him that getting bigger, more important, and more heroic wasn't the point. Going down, becoming humble, and letting go of his inflated sense of himself was where the real treasure lived. This is the opposite of everything our culture tells us about success and growth. We're supposed to climb higher, achieve more, and dominate our fears. Jung discovered that the serpent had different plans entirely. It wanted to teach him about descent, about the wisdom that lives in the valleys of the psyche rather than on the mountaintops of achievement. But Jung realized this wasn't just his personal story. This was happening to all of us. It transcended the individual ego. He writes, "The spirit of the depths has seized mankind and forces self-sacrifice upon it. Do not seek the guilt here or there. The spirit of the depths clutched the fate of man unto itself as it clutched mine. He leads mankind through the river of blood to the mystery. In the mystery, man himself becomes the two principles, the lion and the serpent." The spirit of the depths has seized mankind. We're all being dragged into this confrontation, whether we signed up for it or not. And we are not talking about individual therapy sessions here. We are talking about a species-wide initiation and a collective encounter with everything we've tried to avoid about ourselves and our world. And where does this lead? Through the river of blood to the mystery. That phrase still gives me chills. Jung knew that transformation always costs something, always demands sacrifice. The old self has to die for the new one to emerge. But what's the mystery? We become both the lion and the serpent. The hero stops trying to kill the dragon and realizes they are the dragon. The conscious mind stops fighting the unconscious and discovers they're partners in the same movie. The hero's confrontation with the serpent reveals their essential unity. The mystery transforms everyone involved. The hero gains the serpent's ancient wisdom. The serpent finally finds someone brave enough to receive its gifts. And something new emerges from that union, something that transcends the old story of good versus evil entirely. Now, let me tell you why these ancient stories still hypnotize us with such incredible power. Jung understood that these encounters produce profound effects on audiences because they activate archetypal patterns within every observer. In The Symbolic Life, he explains, the narration or ritual repetition of sacred texts and ceremonies, and the worship of such a figure with dances, music, hymns, prayers, and sacrifices grip the audience with numinous emotions and exalt the participants to identification with the hero. You felt this. Maybe it was watching Luke Skywalker face Darth Vader, or Neo confronting Agent Smith, or even just reading Harry Potter's encounter with the basilisk. Something electric happens in your nervous system. Your heart rate changes. You lean forward. You stop breathing for a moment. Beyond the entertainment, that's your psyche recognizing itself in an ancient pattern. When we witness Perseus facing Medusa, when we watch Heracles battling the Hydra, when we see St. George piercing the dragon's heart, we're experiencing our own confrontation with the unconscious forces that guards our hidden treasures. Jung continues, if we contemplate such a situation with the eyes of a believer, we can understand how the ordinary man is gripped, freed from his impotence and misery, and raised to an almost superhuman status. Think about the last time you felt truly inspired by a story. Really inspired, not just entertained. You probably walked out of that theater or closed that book feeling like you could take on the world. That's what Jung means by being raised to an almost superhuman status. The myth temporarily lifts you out of your small, worried, everyday self and connects you to something vast and heroic within you. This transformation occurs because the myth provides a template for psychological integration. Jung discovered something remarkable about what he calls the serpent's bite. He realized it becomes a healing intervention when properly understood. Snakebite, for instance, is an archetypal situation. Therefore, you find it as a motif in any number of tales. If the archetypal situation underlying the illness can be expressed in the right way, the patient is cured. Your depression, your anxiety, your addiction, your relationship patterns, whatever serpent has sunk its teeth into your life, Jung is saying these wounds follow archetypal patterns. They are not random. They are not meaningless. They are part of ancient stories that have been playing out in human consciousness for millennia. Jung elaborates with deep compassion for human suffering. If no adequate expression is found, the individual is thrown back upon himself into the isolation of being ill. He is alone and has no connection with the world. But if he is shown that his particular ailment is not his ailment only, but a general ailment, even a god's ailment, he is in the company of men and gods, and this knowledge produces a healing effect. This might be the most important thing Jung ever said. When you're struggling with something, when your personal serpent has you by the throat, the worst part isn't the pain itself. It's the isolation. It's feeling like you're the only one who has ever felt this broken, this lost, this afraid. But Jung discovered that your suffering connects you to everyone who has ever lived. Your particular wound is also the wound of humanity itself. Sometimes it's even the wound of the gods. Prometheus stole fire and was chained to a rock. Odin hung himself from a tree. Christ was crucified. The serpent bites everyone, even the divine figures we look up to. This is one of the serpent's ultimate gifts to the hero. It elevates your suffering by making it mythologically significant. It reveals that your struggles participate in universal patterns that have been playing out since consciousness first emerged from the primordial darkness. Your serpent, your struggle, your wound becomes connected to the cosmic serpent that coils through every human heart and mind. You're not alone in this, you never were. Yet Jung warns us of the catastrophic dangers inherent in rejecting this encounter. In Psychology and Alchemy, he shows us what happens when the hero refuses the serpent's invitation. He writes about how Nietzsche, in his Zarathustra, decided to reject the snake and the ugliest man, thus exposing himself to a heroic cramp of consciousness which led, logically enough, to the collapse foretold in the same book. A heroic cramp of consciousness. Have you ever watched someone who's so convinced of their own righteousness and superiority that they become completely rigid? They can't bend, they can't adapt. They're like a bodybuilder who's so muscled up they can't scratch their own back. Nietzsche's Zarathustra became psychologically muscle-bound, too heroic for his own good. This is the great tragedy of Nietzsche. a man whose intellect saw the path but whose life couldn't walk it. The profound gap between his philosophy and his personal integration is the exact focus of my video. Jung believes Nietzsche didn't practice what he preached. And Jung, with his characteristic brutal honesty, points out that Nietzsche actually predicted his own breakdown in the very book where he rejected the serpent. It's almost darkly funny if it weren't so tragic. Zarathustra proclaims with what Jung calls tragic arrogance, "When did ever a dragon die of a serpent's poison?" You can practically hear the superhero music swelling, can't you? It's the kind of line you'd expect to hear right before the hero delivers the killing blow. Except Nietzsche completely missed the point. The dragon and the serpent aren't enemies locked in some cosmic WWE match. They're complementary aspects of the same archetypal force. Nietzsche was essentially declaring war on himself. Jung reveals this in a footnote that should make us pause and reconsider everything. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, he notes that Zarathustra is himself a hero of the race of dragons, for which reason he is also called the Stone of Wisdom. Wait, what? Zarathustra is a dragon. The hero who's rejecting the serpent is actually part of the dragon family himself? Jung is essentially saying that Nietzsche's Superman was throwing a tantrum at his own reflection. The hero who rejects the serpent is rejecting his own deeper nature, his own draconic wisdom. This is what happens when we get too good at being the hero. We start believing our own press releases. We forget that consciousness emerged from the unconscious, that light came out of darkness, that every dragon was once an egg. Nietzsche's tragedy was that he became so enamored with his own heroic altitude that he forgot he had roots in the earth, scales under his skin, and fire in his belly. The man who wrote God is Dead ended up destroying himself by trying to become purely divine, purely conscious, and purely heroic. He rejected the messy, instinctual, earthbound wisdom that could have kept him whole. And Jung, reading this drama decades later, saw it as a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks they can transcend their own shadow without paying the price. The serpent always gets the last word. Always. Even when you think you've won, the true resolution of the hero-serpent encounter involves neither victory nor defeat, but transformation. Jung reveals the mystery when he writes, "It is an age-old mythological idea that the hero, when the light of life is extinguished, goes on living as a snake and is worshipped as a snake. Another widespread primitive idea is the snake form of the spirits of the dead." You heard it right. The hero becomes the serpent. After all that struggle, all that combat, all that heroic posturing, heroes transform into the things they were fighting. It's like discovering that Batman eventually becomes the Joker, or that Luke Skywalker grows up to be Darth Vader. Except it is not a betrayal or a corruption. It is completion. Think about what this means for your own life. Every quality you've been battling in yourself, every shadow you've been trying to defeat, and every serpent you've been wrestling with. You are not meant to destroy them. You are meant to become it. Not in a way that destroys who you are, but in a way that completes who you're becoming. Jung is describing something that happens to every mature human being if they live long enough and pay attention. The rebel becomes the establishment. The idealistic young person becomes the wise elder who understands complexity. The person who once fought against authority learns to wield it responsibly. The serpent thus gets integrated. And when the hero becomes the serpent, they get worshipped as a snake. Not feared, not avoided, not seen as fallen or corrupted. Worshipped. Because a human being who has integrated their own serpent wisdom becomes something sacred. They become someone who can guide others through the same transformation. This is the Ouroboros principle, operating within the hero's journey. You know that ancient symbol of the serpent eating its own tail, right? For those who want to go even deeper on that specific symbol, I've done a full 2-hour analysis of the Ouroboros and its meaning for the modern psyche, which I'll link below. That's what's happening here psychologically. The tail-eating serpent reveals all apparent oppositions as moments in an eternal cycle of renewal and transformation. The hero's journey ends with the hero becoming wise enough to be the serpent for the next generation of heroes. The mentor who was once Obi-Wan now plays the role of the challenging force that pushes the new hero toward growth. The wise woman who once needed rescuing now becomes the guardian of the treasure that tests the next seeker's worthiness. Death becomes rebirth. The end becomes the beginning. Every ending is secretly a new beginning in disguise. And every time you think you've finally defeated your inner serpent, you discover you've actually grown large enough to contain it, to become it, to use its wisdom for the benefit of others who are still fighting the same battle you once fought. This is what Jung means by transformation. You don't transcend the serpent. You become it, consciously and deliberately, for the sake of the whole continuing story. But let me bring this ancient wisdom into your modern life, because that's where it must live to have any real power. In our time, when individual heroism has been reduced to superhero fantasies and corporate success stories, when men are told to be either pure light or embrace darkness, Jung's brilliant observations on the hero-serpent encounter are medicine for our souls. Think about your own life for a moment. What patterns keep appearing despite your best efforts to eliminate them? What types of people consistently trigger you? What aspects of yourself do you work hardest to hide or deny? These are your own serpents, and they are not accidents. They are not character flaws to be overcome through willpower. They are guardians of treasures that your conscious ego desperately needs for wholeness. The serpent of perfectionism that prevents you from creating might be guarding the treasure of your ability to express yourself authentically and truthfully. You know this serpent well. It's the voice that says your work isn't good enough yet, that you need to revise just one more time, that whispers, "What if people think this is terrible?" But underneath all that paralysis lives something beautiful. Your deep reverence for truth, your genuine desire to offer something meaningful to the world. The serpent of people-pleasing that exhausts you might be protecting your genuineness and your personal power. This one shows up when you say yes, when you mean no, when you twist yourself into knots trying to make everyone comfortable, when you lose track of what you actually want because you're so busy managing other people's feelings. But coiled beneath that exhausting performance is your authentic capacity for compassion, your real desire to connect, your actual personal power that's been hiding so long you've forgotten it exists. The serpent of emotional control that keeps you isolated might be guarding the treasure of profound intimacy and connection. Maybe you're the person who never quite lets anyone all the way in, who keeps conversations surface level, or who changes the subject when things get too real. You've gotten so good at managing your emotional temperature that you've forgotten what it feels like to let someone see you completely undone, completely yourself. But that careful control is protecting your heart's enormous capacity for love, for being moved, for the kind of connection that could transform everything. In relationships, every intimate bond eventually summons the serpent, and this is not a dysfunction. It's the relationship doing its sacred job of promoting psychological growth. We fall in love with people who carry both our unlived potential and our disowned shadow. The beloved becomes a screen onto which we project both our treasures and our serpents. You've lived this, haven't you? That moment when someone walks into your life and suddenly you can see possibilities you never knew existed. They're confident where you're insecure. They're spontaneous where you're careful. They're calm where you're anxious. It feels like meeting the missing piece of yourself. At first, in the romantic phase, we see only the treasure. You complete me, we say, because our partner seems to embody everything we lack. Their organized nature makes you feel grounded. Their emotional expressiveness makes you feel alive. Their adventurous spirit makes you feel free. You're drunk on the illusion that they can give you access to parts of yourself you've never been able to reach. But inevitably, the shadow projection begins. The qualities that attracted us start to irritate us. Their organization becomes rigidity. Their emotional expressiveness becomes drama. Their adventurous spirit becomes irresponsibility. You start having fights about things that seemed charming 6 months ago. Our serpents begin to emerge, triggered by the one person we most want to impress. This is where most relationships either end or become battlegrounds. Either we decide this person has changed and we need to find someone new, or we dig in for years of trying to fix each other, convinced that if they would just stop being so organized/emotional/adventurous, we could be happy again. But Jung's wisdom reveals a third possibility. We can learn to use our triggers as invitations to reclaim projected parts of ourselves. When your partner's need for space triggers your abandonment serpent, you can ask, what treasure is this guardian protecting? Perhaps it's guarding your capacity to be self-sufficient, your ability to trust in your partner's process and life's unfolding rhythm. Instead of making your partner wrong for needing space, you can recognize that your serpent of abandonment is actually trying to protect your deep capacity for love and connection. It's terrified that if people leave, you'll lose access to something essential. But the treasure it's guarding is your own wholeness, your own ability to love yourself so fully that other people's rhythms become gifts rather than threats. In your career, the workplace becomes a powerful serpent-summoning environment because it activates our deepest fears around survival, recognition, and purpose. Think about it. Work is where we spend most of our waking hours, where we earn the money that keeps us alive, where we either feel valued or invisible, where we discover whether we matter in the world or we're just taking up space. The imposter serpent that makes you feel like a fraud, despite years of success, might be guarding your authentic confidence by forcing you to continuously improve. You know this serpent intimately. If you've ever sat in a meeting thinking, I can't believe they haven't figured out that I have no idea what I'm doing. But that serpent isn't lying to you about your incompetence. It's protecting your integrity, your commitment to excellence, and your refusal to become arrogant or lazy. It keeps you learning, growing, and staying humble enough to keep getting better. The competition serpent that makes you jealous of colleagues' achievements might be protecting your drive to become excellent in any endeavor. When Sarah gets the promotion you wanted, when Michael's project gets all the attention, when everyone's talking about Jessica's brilliant presentation, that hot spike of envy in your chest is your serpent guarding your own ambition, your own desire for mastery, and your own capacity to create something that matters. The authority serpent that makes you terrified of leadership might be guarding your capacity for wise, compassionate power. Maybe you've spent years avoiding management roles, declining opportunities to lead teams, telling yourself you're not a leader type. But that serpent might be protecting your understanding that real leadership is a sacred responsibility, that having power over other people's lives and careers requires a level of wisdom and humility you're still developing. These serpents are the very forces that can transform you from someone who just performs a job into someone who embodies their authentic purpose. They're not obstacles to your career success. They're the uncomfortable pressure that creates the diamond of who you're meant to become professionally. Your imposter syndrome forces you to stay competent. Your competitive jealousy keeps your standards high. Your fear of authority ensures that when you do step into power, you'll wield it responsibly. The serpents aren't trying to keep you small. They're trying to make sure that when you grow into someone worthy of the influence you'll eventually have. For those of you called to create, to build, to express what burns inside you, the serpent takes on particularly vicious forms. As we already mentioned, the perfectionist serpent whispers that your work isn't ready, that you need to polish it more, and that revealing it will expose you as a fraud. But this serpent guards your ability to craft something excellent, to refuse the mediocrity that drowns our culture. The comparison serpent shows you others who seem more talented, more successful, and more worthy of attention. But this dragon protects your unique voice, the perspective that only you can offer, the vision that the world needs to hear from you specifically. The commercial serpent hisses that you must choose between expressing yourself authentically and actually connecting with people who need what you create. But this guardian protects your power to do both, to speak your truth and to serve those who hunger for exactly what you have to give. However, integration doesn't happen through understanding alone. Jung learned this through his own dangerous descent into the unconscious. It requires what he called active imagination, deliberately engaging with the figures and forces that emerge from the depths of your psyche. This process, where you start fishing within the ocean of the unconscious, is one of the most challenging and rewarding parts of life. My video, Jung Explains How to Imagine and Transcend, covers exactly how this works, with a complete narration of Jung's essay on active imagination, or as he called it back then, transcendent function. When you feel triggered, instead of trying to eliminate the trigger, try talking to it. Ask your perfectionist serpent what it's trying to protect. Dialogue with your people-pleasing serpent about what it learned in childhood, about love and safety. Have a conversation with your control serpent about what would happen if you let go. This is an ancient technology for psychological integration that Jung rediscovered through his own courageous experimentation. He found that these inner figures, when engaged with respect rather than resistance, often revealed profound wisdom about what the psyche needed for wholeness. The process follows a recognizable pattern. First comes recognition, the brutal honesty of admitting that your serpent exists and has been running significant parts of your life. Then comes dialogue, the willingness to engage with these forces as valid aspects of your psyche rather than problems to be solved. Next comes embodiment, actually feeling and expressing the energy that the serpent carries, but consciously rather than compulsively. Integration follows, finding ways to express the serpent's gifts without being possessed by its shadow. This leads to sacrifice, the ego's willingness to die to its old identity and be reborn with expanded capacity. Finally comes service, using the integrated power not for personal aggrandizement, but for something larger than yourself. This is a spiraling journey that deepens with each cycle. New serpents appear as consciousness evolves, each one offering access to new treasures and new dimensions of wholeness. The neuroscience of our time validates what Jung discovered through introspection. When we consciously engage with triggered states instead of avoiding them, we literally rewire our brains. The prefrontal cortex strengthens its capacity for executive function. The amygdala learns to regulate its threat responses. The corpus callosum enhances communication between the brain's hemispheres. We become more integrated human beings at the biological level. But the ultimate goal is not integration for its own sake. Jung understood that individuation serves our collective transformation. As more people learn to integrate their serpents, to become consciously both lion and serpent, hero and dragon, the collective unconscious itself begins to shift. We live in a time when humanity faces serpents on a collective scale, and I won't insult your intelligence with euphemisms. War is spreading across the globe everywhere, and nuclear weapons hang over everything like a sword of Damocles. Our economies are rigged casino games, where the house always wins, and young adults can't afford homes, partners, or children. Inflation devours purchasing power, while billionaires play with space rockets. The social contract that promised hard work would lead to prosperity has been revealed as a lie. Entire generations are being priced out of the basic elements of adult life. My boys know what I'm talking about here. Masculinity itself is under assault. Men are told they're toxic for displaying the qualities that built civilization. Boys are drugged into compliance in schools designed for girls. Young men retreat into video games and pornography because the real world offers them no heroic role, no meaningful quest, and no recognition of their essential nature. The birth rates of developed nations are plummeting toward extinction. Western civilization cannibalizes itself through mass immigration that its leaders welcome while its people suffer the consequences. Crime explodes in cities run by ideologues who prosecute victims and coddle predators. The rule of law becomes the rule of whoever screams loudest about their victimhood. Technology also enslaves us through algorithms designed to harvest our attention and manipulate our behavior. Social media turns human connection into performance theater. Artificial intelligence threatens to make human intelligence obsolete. We're raising the first generation in history that may be less capable than their parents. These are the serpents guarding the treasures that our species needs for survival and evolution. The serpent of war might be guarding our rediscovery of what's actually worth fighting for, what's worth dying for, and what distinguishes a man from a consumer. The serpent of economic collapse might be protecting our need to rebuild systems based on creating value rather than engineering every system for profit maximization. The serpent of masculine crisis might be guarding the essential warrior energy that every healthy civilization requires. But just as in the individual journey, these collective serpents can only reveal their treasures when we approach them with integration rather than domination, with wisdom rather than force, and with the understanding that the guardian and the gift are mysteriously one. Remember, Jung revealed in the Red Book that man himself becomes the two principles, the lion and the serpent. We all have to integrate both in a dynamic balance. The lion represents solar consciousness, heroic will, and the active principle of directed energy. The serpent represents lunar wisdom, instinctual knowledge, and the receptive principle of cyclical energy. Integration means becoming consciously both, strong and vulnerable, independent and interconnected, rational and intuitive, spiritual and material, individual and collective. These are polarities to be held in creative tension. Ancients understood this integration through symbols we still use today. The medicine wheel of Native Americans maps the integration of opposites through the four directions. The Taoist yin-yang shows opposites in dynamic balance, each containing the seed of the other. The Hindu chakra system maps integration through 7 energy centers, each balancing different aspects of experience. It's easy to look at old myths filled with stories of heroes, dragons, and serpents and see them as just that, stories. Relics in a museum of the mind. But what if they're not? What if they're maps? Maps for a journey of transformation, still breathing, still relevant to the life you are living right now. What if the secret is not some grand one-time revelation? Because for most of us, fighting the serpent is a quiet commitment and a daily practice. It's about choosing every single day to be deliberate instead of letting our habits run the show. To seek wholeness instead of staying stuck in one corner of who we are. Let's start here, in the morning, in front of the mirror. Take a breath. Feel that person looking back at you. In that one chest, there is incredible power and profound fragility breathing together. Look at your body as a vessel of untapped potential, not just as something that carries you around and seeks comfort. Socrates once said, "It's a shame to grow old without ever seeing the beauty and strength your body is capable of." He knew something we've forgotten. It's hard to wrestle with the demons in your head when your own body feels like a stranger. So get to know your body again. Train it with the dedication of someone whose life depends on it, because it does. Learn to handle conflict, not to seek violence, but because a person who can't stand firm for themselves, their loved ones, or their principles when things get difficult feels hollow. This kind of training teaches you how to face aggression, both from others and from within yourself, and turn it from a destructive fire into a focused light. It forces you to look your own inner serpent in the eye and learn its movements. Build the kind of strength that matters. Not for show, but for substance. The kind that lets you carry a friend, climb a mountain, and face the rawness of reality without crumbling. Your ancestors survived ice ages with their own 2 hands. That resilience is sleeping in your bones, waiting for you to awaken it through the hardship you choose, so you're ready for the hardship you don't. And learn things that matter when the screens go dark. Could you build a fire to stay warm, grow your own food, fix what's broken? Could you find your way home without a GPS? Can you think straight when your heart is pounding with fear? These are the important questions we need to ask ourselves today. Set your aim on something more meaningful than your own comfort. Choose to grow, even when it's not safe. Choose the truth, even when it's not popular. When you feel the pull of mindless scrolling, maybe do a few push-ups instead, or go for a run. When you feel the urge to complain about the world, find one small thing in your own space that you can fix. This journey asks us to be honest in our relationships. Being nice is often just fear wearing a pleasant mask. Being kind is what a strong person does when they choose to use their power for good. Learn to say no, without feeling like you have to write a novel to justify it. Learn to be okay with disappointing people who don't have your best interests at heart. Learn to let your anger be a clean, quick fire that signals a boundary, instead of a slow poison that rots you from the inside. Find people who challenge you to be better, not ones who co-sign your excuses. A partner who inspires you to be a fierce protector of the good things in your life, not one who wishes you were tamer. Friends who will call you on your nonsense. This is what it means to be a good steward of your own limited time and energy. Your work is what you do. Your worth is who you are. Build skills that make you valuable. Create things that people truly need. Learn to negotiate for what you're worth, and most importantly, develop the strength to walk away from any situation that compromises your soul. This is where the real alchemy begins. You learn to turn frustration into fuel. You use disappointment as the energy to build something better. At the end of the day, take a moment to be quiet. What serpents arose today? Where did you shrink back in fear? What did that cowardice cost you? Don't beat yourself up. Just notice and ask yourself how you can meet tomorrow with a little more courage. It might take months just to stop lying to yourself about why your life is the way it is. It could take a year to learn how to have a real conversation with the parts of yourself you've been trying to ignore. It could take years more to learn how to live from this new integrated place. But isn't this the only form of perfection that we actually know? Most people want to reach some mythical state of perfect peace where nothing can touch you. That place doesn't exist. Forget about it. Your goal is to become the kind of person who can take care of whatever life sends your way. And let me be brutally honest with you about this. The challenges don't wait until you're ready. They show up when you're exhausted, when you've finally gotten comfortable, or when you're smugly convinced you've cracked the code of life. And here's what nobody tells you. When you think you've hit rock bottom, there's usually a basement. And sometimes there's a sub-basement, with its own serpents. It's easy to blame the world, to blame women, to blame other men, to blame your parents, your boss, the economy, or the political climate. It's the oldest story there is, and it's also the most boring. Or you can choose a different story. You can choose to stop running and start descending. Here's the secret every ancient myth has been trying to tell you. The monster you've been sprinting away from your entire life is standing guard over the exact thing you need most. That dragon of perfectionism breathing down your neck? It's protecting your fierce desire for excellence, your refusal to settle for mediocrity, the serpent of people-pleasing that's been strangling you. It's guarding your genuine capacity to serve others, to care deeply, to create connection. The demon of control that keeps you up at night? It's protecting your ability to bring order and beauty out of chaos. But knowing this intellectually is completely useless without action. You have to be willing to look like an idiot. You have to risk failing spectacularly. You have to be prepared to stumble around in the dark, feeling foolish, while you're searching for something real. So here's your choice, the same choice every human being has faced since consciousness began. Will you keep shadowboxing with phantoms? Will you spend your life fighting enemies that exist mainly in your head? Or will you find the courage to walk down into the dark and discover what treasure your serpents have been protecting all this time? The serpent is waiting. It's been waiting your whole life. It's not your enemy, it never was. It's your teacher, your guide, and your initiation into becoming who you were always meant to be. And it's getting impatient. The video is over. For those of you still here, I want to be direct with you about two things. First, this exploration is just the beginning. This video is part of a much larger series on the serpent archetype. We will delve into the Garden of Eden, the devil and the serpent, Moses and the Leviathan, the Orphic mysteries, Kundalini, alchemy, magic, and much more. Many of these deep dives will be publicly available right here. The most in-depth and sensitive material, however, will be shared first, or exclusively, with members on Patreon. This brings me to my second point, the reality of how this work gets made. Creating these videos is my life's work. Most of my waking hours are dedicated to research, writing, and production to ensure the quality and depth you see. Now, as you know, standard YouTube ads run on these videos. That provides a small foundation, but it's unpredictable and insufficient to support this project alone. This creates a very clear choice. The conventional path is to chase clicks and compromise, turn complex ideas into shallow listicles, design thumbnails with gaping mouths and red arrows, and interrupt deep thoughts with jarring sponsorships for VPNs or meal kits that have nothing to do with our shared purpose here. I will not compromise the integrity of this work for that. So I have chosen a different path, one built on a direct relationship with the community that values it. Patreon is the mechanism that makes this possible. It is the only thing that keeps this project independent and protects it from the pressure to sell out. If you get value from what we do here and want to ensure it continues and deepens, there are a few ways to get involved. For a few dollars, you can join our private community. The heart of the operation, however, is the soul tier. That's where I post the more sensitive material and the deeper explorations I often cannot release publicly. The support from our soul members is what truly sustains this work. For those who want to engage even more directly, there are higher tiers for one-on-one conversations. The link is in the description below. I'm laying this out for you because it's the reality of the work. If you believe in what we're doing and you have the means, your support is what fuels it. Thank you for your time and your trust.